right, welcome to episode 3. Today I have my coach Tyge. So today we're gonna go in. I got a bunch of questions from you guys, but before we begin that, I kind of just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Tyge. I do like Tyrex nutrition, so contest prep for like bodybuilders, powerlifting, strongman, marathon running, MMA fighting, and then like general lifestyle, weight loss, all that kind of good stuff. So
Very cool.
yeah, I have a background in nutrition from Oregon State University. I'm not quite done with my degree, but I am working on it, and then like multiple certifications and like 5 years of coaching.
Jeez. Well, there we go. So the first question that I thought would be a great way to start it is, what made Ty study the science of nutrition?
So a little long-winded, but not super long-winded. So in the military, basically my first year, I didn't even know what lifting weights was. So I went in boot camp, got done with that. We got slated for a new job. So I was a like mineman, 3rd class petty officer. I got slated for that job and I went back to training. And we were like, hey, let's get jacked and yoked for the beach. So I thought it would take like 6 months, and here we are almost 10 years later. But so I got picked up for that job and then was in training. We're like, oh, let's start working out. And then all of my friends got bigger, faster, and stronger than I did, faster than I did. And I was like, okay, what's going on here? So basically went on deployment for like a year and some change. Had a really interesting time. I ran like an underwater drone program that was really cool, but I still didn't put on any muscle. I put on such a tiny amount of muscle tissue, and I didn't even know what calories were at the time.
Dang.
So when I was getting out, I was about a year. I came back to the U.S. I was stationed in Seal Beach. Started trying to figure out what I wanted to do after the military, and got talked into a little bit by my dad to go look into like going to Oregon State for nutrition. Didn't know about the whole college thing, so I slowly got into nutrition and started learning more and more. Really started working on my degree through like Western for a couple years, and then I switched over to Oregon State because they're like one of the few programs in Oregon that actually has nutrition.
Right.
And started piecing things together, like what calories were, what protein does, what's the macronutrients, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then delved a little bit farther into it, more and more. And so that's kind of how I got started. I was really, really frustrated that everybody I trained with got bigger than I did. Everybody I trained with got faster than I did because we did a lot of running in the military.
Oh, okay.
And then even on top of that, I couldn't figure out why it was all happening faster for them. And then coming to find out I was not eating anywhere nearly as much as I should have been.
So they were eating more than you were?
They were, 3 to 5 inches shorter than I were. They were 10 to 15 pounds heavier than I were, and they had a bigger appetite. They were eating more than I was. Some cases drinking more than I was too. So they're still getting calories in.
Right.
But I just couldn't figure it out. I was like, why does this keep happening? And it was over a span of like 3 different people.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, okay, well there has to be like a rationale or reason behind this.
Yeah.
Come to find out, I'm probably should be a runner instead of trying to lift weights, but that's a different story for another day. But my genetic component, all those kind of things going into it, and then my metabolism seems to run a little bit higher than most people. So that's just having to eat a lot more food is kind of the main key.
So how much food do you think you were eating in the beginning, like when you were trying to get big?
Everybody says 5,000 calories, but I was probably cusping barely over 2,100 calories.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, because it was, because we didn't have a lot of money, so it was, we eat at the galley, which is like on base, and so they'll only give you 1 scoop of a thing.
Oh, jeez.
And so I was like, oh, it's food, and it keeps me full, so
Yeah.
I was just eating what was there, and that was kind of the biggest key, where it was just like, oh, you get 1 scoop of this, or even when you're on the ship, like they have to ration food to some degree on the ship, right? So everybody gets a serving of the food, and so they were bringing protein shakes, they were bringing carbs, they were eating all that kind of stuff outside of base too, and that's where I wasn't quite hitting as much as them.
Okay.
And then once I started implementing a little bit more of those things, and being like 6'3" and all that kind of stuff, like plays a role into how much food you should be consuming. So like the guy I was working out with, Bradner, he's like 5'7" probably.
Oh, jeez.
And 5'8", and then I'm like 6'3", and we're eating the exact same things.
Right.
It was looking back, it was cool because it's like, well, if he eats enough to grow, and I eat the same as him, it's not the same amount for that person to grow.
That makes sense.
Because we were eating, we were making the same protein shakes, we were training the same time, we were eating the same food at the on base, we'd go out to eat together, like we were just attached to the hip the entire time.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't figure out, I was like, oh, I need like 1,000 calories more than he does a day to grow, and it just didn't happen. So
that makes sense. Okay, so after all of that, When did you decide that you wanted to start helping other people? Like, when did that idea come out, do you think?
That came out pretty close to like my first or second year at Western. I got a couple people that were just helping me like start with their meal plans and start helping them a little bit with like training. I worked at World Gym for a little bit in Dallas, and there's a couple people I met there that were just starting to let me do it. I did a lot of stuff for free, a lot of things for free for an extended period of time. And then I slowly started working at like West Coast Strength underneath the dietitian guy that was there at the time, and he taught me a lot. And then learning from Alex and like even Jerry, learned a lot from him too as well. But just the combination of like sitting under kind of helpful people that helped a lot. The dietitian guy at West Coast, I learned a lot from him at the time about like everything basically. But I was getting paid by the VA to like sit underneath of him and shadow him as a future job possibility.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah, and so that was fun. And then when he left, Alex, we had some conversations, but I was already in the process of helping people, and so he was kind of helping teach some stuff more that comes to like bodybuilding aspects, and then working with Jerry helped me teach a little bit more about the bodybuilding aspects. And then I took a bunch of different certification courses and learned more and more through my degree, and that like slowly escalated into helping multiple people.
Right on.
And then kind of getting into working with my first competitors, and then understanding what strongman need and what powerlifters need and what bodybuilders need and what lifestyle people need, and then having a lot of success with them, and then it's slowly escalating.
Very nice. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So what would you say is like the biggest difference between like, let's say, a lifestyle person versus a bodybuilder? Like, what are those? Are they even comparable at that point?
Yeah, I would say they're very much comparable, especially from like a coaching standpoint. Like, I have a girl that I'm working with that's 80 some pounds down right now. Right. I have her brother that I've helped, and we've got him down roughly almost 100 pounds. And I have another gentleman that I'm working down with that I think we're like 92 pounds down the last time we did it. So those are like lifestyle people, but they still want like linear results. And so if you're trying to get, the fastest way to your progress, eating relatively the same amount of food every single day, relatively the same portions, is the same way that you would treat a bodybuilder and maximize their progress. And so they're different in the ways that like you approach. Like they get a lot more, not a lot more, but a decent amount more of flexibility in their diet, right? So that that's super helpful for them. Whereas like the bodybuilder, it's, hey man, I need you to do all these things. I just need you to notch it up as much as we possibly can on the progress. And so, if a lifestyle treats it the same way that a bodybuilder, they're going to have that significantly more linear progress as they go, like a bodybuilder would. And so, depending on what the goal is and what they're trying to do, they're going to have much more trackable and like measurable progress than someone who's a lot more lax on what they're trying to do at the time. They're not really sticking to it, but there's a lot of flexibility that we can get with like macro tracking, or just going off calories for certain days because they want to go out to the beach. So if they stay under X amount of calories throughout the day, that's super, super helpful because that gives them the flexibility to have what they want that day.
Right.
And so if you have 6 days out of 7 that are perfect and that one day-ish, but it's still under your like total metabolic needs, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. Whereas at the bodybuilder, it's like, I'm trying to have you hit all these meals very specifically targeted because I want to maximize your return, right? If you're missing a lot of pieces throughout the week, that's going to add up, right? If you're missing one 500 calorie meal every single week, that adds up very, very quickly. Over a span of a year, that's 52 times 500, which I can't do that math off the top of my head, but it's like 25,000-ish calories, right?
Yeah, just about.
It's 26,000 calories. So, if you're 26,000. I was right. 26,000 calories. If you're missing 26,000 calories and tons of protein in that time frame, that'll add up over the period, right?
Oh, for sure.
That'll be possible of pounds of muscle tissue or pounds of results, and like that's the big thing that we're looking for. Is to make it as trackable to get to whatever your specific goal or whatever your genetic potential goal is as fast as possible. Okay. But especially with like protein timings and things like that. Like there's the hierarchy of needs, right? So you have your like calories at the bottom, you have your macronutrients above that, and then you have your meal timing above that. So if you get a total daily calorie, that's going to dictate whether you either gain mass or lose mass. And that's just total mass, right? That's not muscle tissue. That's not nothing, right? Right. Macros dictate that, your protein, carbohydrates, and fats. water asterisk. But
that makes sense.
Those are going to dictate it of like how much the total daily intake you get of each thing. You know, timing of carbohydrates. That's where the third block comes in important. So you have a muscle protein synthesis threshold that you can reach, right? Like your body's only going to be able to use this much protein in one sitting, but anything above that is going to be used as energy.
Oh, okay. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so like once you, like if you have a maximum threshold, which can controlled by genetic and size and all that kind of stuff, is 25 grams of protein. If you eat 50 grams of protein in that meal, well, 25 grams of that is going to be turned into energy, and you're going to use that as your expenditure.
Oh, damn.
The thermal effect of food and then muscle protein synthesis. Like, whereas like carbohydrates and fats and things like that play like a very vital role. And then like timing of those nutrients. Like if you're in a deficit, like you're going to want your biggest meal around your training window.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because that's going to give you the most energy, right?
Right.
And then you want your post-workout meal to be really high in carbohydrates too, because you want to start using all those proteins as muscle tissue. You're not going to want to use that as an energy source.
No.
So.
Right.
Yep.
Very, very well. Okay, no, that makes sense. I hope you guys are writing down notes. This is good shit.
I am long-winded. It's a problem.
No. This is perfect because like a lot of people ask us questions. I'm just gonna point them to this because this is good.
The biggest the biggest thing that I cannot stress enough is the idea of protein. That like once you hit a certain threshold, like different people are gonna have different amounts of protein that they can use in one sitting. And I cannot stress it enough that like once you actually reach over that threshold, you still have that as energy.
Okay, so you have a set amount, but then if you go over, it's energy.
It's energy, right? So you're using it to gluconeogenesis is what it's called. The idea that it turns into kind of carbohydrates in this really, really inefficient process. It starts to get used as a source of energy for your body. So it helps create ATP. There's some crazy stuff with the molecule of ripping amino acid structures off of it. But you tear all these things off and you still have a carbon backbone. So you still want to use that as an energy source. Your body is very, very, very efficient at using things to keep you alive.
Okay.
And so just because you overconsume your protein doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You're still absorbing that. You're still having the energy. But it's just not being used to build muscle tissue. So if you have 100 grams of protein in a sitting, you're not going to absorb 25% of that, and then you're going to, excrete or go to the bathroom. You're not going to poop out chicken breast.
Oh,
right.
You
still absorb that.
You still absorb it. Okay, because that's the question I've always got is, well, what happens if you use too much protein? Is it just going to turn into fat, or is it?
Yeah. Not really.
Not really.
It really, really inefficiently gets turned into a source of energy for your body, and you lose like 20% energy, or I don't remember the exact amount of energy that you lose, but you lose a good portion of calories trying to turn it into something that's a usable source of energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, quick question: what I'm trying to say is, when you're trying to put on as much muscle tissue and as much mass, would you recommend higher protein then in that case, or is it all dependent, or like how do we approach that?
So with the trying to accrue as much mass as possible. Like protein is the structure that gets turned into muscle tissue, right? So you eat the protein, it goes into the stomach, it gets digested, it gets broken apart into the strands of amino acids. That gets pushed into the intestinal lumen. Some other cool stuff happens where you absorb amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. So a whole bunch of those click together in these really, 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 really long strands, and that folds into this 3D structure. And then that's a protein.
Okay.
So your body rips that all apart, and then it absorbs those amino acids to be able to shuttle them around the body where they need to go. And then that's what gets put into cells. And then other things happen, and you have to synthesize that into protein. And so those individual amino acids get used by what's called a ribosome. It's a cellular energy. It's a cellular piece of machinery that basically clips these specific strands onto what the body needs to build for that protein. Whether it's like collagen, like whether it's making your hair, where it's making your skin, where it's making enzymes for the human body to do cool different processes that you need, or like to build muscle tissue.
Right.
And so I want to maximize the daily protein that you can probably use to build muscle tissue, which is, depending on the person, anywhere between like 20 and 50 grams of protein per sitting.
Per sitting, okay.
Per meal, right?
Yeah.
So if I can bolus that out 6 or 7 times a day, I want to do that, because every time you can do that, you have like this refractory period, or where you kind of get rid of amino acids in the bloodstream. And so you kind of get that out of the system, and then you have the ability to kind of reset that system and then hit for protein again. And so a lot of times I hear when someone's trying to build mass is what? They get full. And so if I can get them a good, like what their protein threshold should be per meal, and then stack the rest of it being either carbohydrates or fats, trying to sit a little bit more towards carbohydrates, trying to really sit harder on carbohydrates, I'll be honest.
Right, okay.
That's what's going to provide your body the energy to build the proteins.
Okay, so carbs and fats is more energy then.
Yep.
And then protein's the builder.
Yep.
Okay.
So carbs are a much faster use of energy. They make a lot more ATP, and that helps run cellular machinery. And so if I can get a lot more carbs in there and keep you a little bit hungrier throughout the day so you can get more food down, you're going to have a higher ability to put on more muscle tissue because you're not missing meals, because you're not doing this, but you're still maximizing the protein per sitting, per bolus.
Yep.
And then the rest of that, you want to use carbohydrates because that's what's going to feed the growth of muscle tissue. So carbohydrates are protein sparing. So basically, the body's going to use this super efficient source of energy instead of using the protein to use as energy. And so then that protein can be used to build the muscle tissue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so then you can use those carbohydrates to build the muscle tissue instead of using the protein as energy. Right. But then the meal timing, if you can stack that multiple times throughout the day, then you can accrue more muscle tissue over the long term.
And that makes sense. Okay, so with all that being said too, what do you think, from a coaching perspective, what do you think is the number one downfall with athletes that just can't like fall off, or like in some senses lose motivation? Is it just the monotony of it, or what do you notice the most?
I don't have a great answer because I think it's super athlete dependent.
Okay.
There's so many factors. Like people are extremely busy. There's like the key to bodybuilding. Like it depends on how competitive you want to be.
Okay.
And I think that's a very, very internal factor. Like you want to be as far as you can possibly go, whatever it'll carry you to be, and you don't care what you have to do to really get there.
Right.
And other people are like, I want to be competitive at the local level. Like, I want to go out and I want to have a good time with my family, here and there. I want to be able to spend time with them. I have kids, I have a wife, I have a job, I have a stressful job, I have 70-hour work weeks that I have to do, plus I have kids' soccer on the weekends. It's such an internal drive that that's something that you have to want for yourself.
And that makes sense. Yeah.
Now, like, from a coaching perspective, I'm going to try and make it as easily as I possibly can to get you to the level that you want to be.
Okay.
I'm so tired of rice. Okay, let's switch to potatoes. This is super hard to prep. Okay, go to Trader Joe's and buy chicken breast. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do to still maximize your progress. Oh man, I'm so tired of eating chicken. Okay, let's use turkey. Whatever it may be. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of different things that you can do in 2024.
Right.
That will give you the ability to still hit your progress and do your goals just as efficiently as you could. But it's an internal drive of like, I'm going to eat these 5 meals a day. I'm going to set up my time for the gym. I'm going to train my butt off the entire time I'm inside the gym.
Right.
I'm going to go home and I'm going to recover. I'm going to sleep 8 hours a night. I'm going to reduce the stress that I need. Like, that's a lot of things to ask from somebody.
Right.
Especially when a large percentage of the population is overweight or obese.
That makes sense. So you can only do so much to, like, quote unquote motivate people. It's kind of like, you kind of have to have a little bit of drive, yourself. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And that's the hardest part from a coaching perspective. Is you can have a crazy competitive person, but they just don't want it themselves bad enough.
Oh man, I bet that's hard.
It is super hard to watch somebody where you're just like, dude, you can go really far with this if you want it that bad. And and that's okay.
That's fine. Right.
There's nothing wrong with not wanting to go super far with the hobby that you picked. It's okay. Like, you don't want to be the number one woodcrafter in the world.
Right.
You want to go out and you want to have beers on the weekend with your boys. Like, that's okay, but from a coaching perspective, it's like, oh, I can see how we could perfect this and go it, but you're asking somebody to live like a robot.
And you can't ask that from people.
And yeah, you can.
Well, you can, but you can't demand it from them. Like,
yeah, you can't force it.
No, even though you really want to, it's just like you kind of have to it's an element of like letting go at that point, huh?
Yeah, it's not so much letting go. I think it's trying to make them as competitive as they want to be.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I mean that in like absolutely no rude way possible. It's to do everything, like I think as a coaching responsibility, it's to try and do everything that you can to get the most out of the athlete.
Right.
And, whether that's switching meals, that's cutting down to like 3 or 4 meals a day, to try and get them the most amount of progress. Like the difference between 5 meals or 6 meals a day and 3 meals a day is probably not that big of a difference in the long term, especially once they hit the routine and they really, really follow through and they hammer every single detail out.
Yep.
To be like, hey man, I just need you to add a protein shake and some carbs before dinner.
Oh. Right.
And then slow. Okay, hey, now you're hungry. Let's turn that into a meal. Like there's a lot of things you can do to kind of get that out of somebody. But
yeah,
you need that communication. You need that willpower. You need that drive. Like it's really hard on the weekends to keep it together for some people. So.
And that makes sense. And I think one thing that we've talked about quite a bit, and that I'm a big believer on, is having like a good relationship with the client and coach. Yeah. Especially for bodybuilding, because like if you guys don't click, you can't really go as far as you'd like in some senses. Do you believe in that? Or?
Yeah, one of my biggest things is like I don't want you to treat me like a stranger.
Yeah.
I want you to message me. I want you to talk to me. I want you to communicate with me. I want that feedback. I want you to send me pictures of you inside the gym training. Like I want all of those things, because like the better we understand each other and like the way that we both work is so much better in the long term, because you'll just get so much more out of your process with the specific person. Like if I'm like even not being on my phone for the last 20 minutes, I'm like I want to text you back, like kind of thing. But is having those like quick response rates. Like you're never gonna see something from me where it takes me a week back to text you.
Right.
It might take me like a couple hours, but I'm trying to get back to you as soon as possible, because I want you to know that if you reach out, that I'm there to help for whatever specific thing that you need. And if you text me like every day, like, hey, I'm going to McDonald's, what should I get there? I'm gonna be like, come on, bro, let's get it together here. But like your worst case scenario, you're out of town on a trip and you dropped your food container.
Oh shoot.
And you're like, I don't even have a scale. It's like, okay, let's figure it out. Like I'll text you through like ordering or getting something at like wherever it may be, as best as I can, as fast as I can, right? Like I might be driving or sleeping or something, but I'm gonna try and message you back as fast as we can, but still try and hit that thing, because then I know you're on top of your goals, instead of being like, drop my meal prep container, let's go to Five Guys. Like, there's a big separation between the two.
That makes sense. So another question I have is, what's like the most satisfying thing you get out of coaching? And you're like, what makes you so passionate about it?
It's the results-driven orientation. It's the most extreme version of nutrition.
Okay.
It's like all the cool things that I like with working with people. It's, kind of helping them get to the best spot that they want to be in. I had a really cool question from somebody. It was like, what's your favorite type of athlete to work with? Is it strongman? Is it powerlifting? Is it bodybuilding? Is it running? Is it... what specific group do you like the most? Is it lifestyle people? Like, who do you enjoy working with the most?
Yep.
And I can't say that I have like a specific person or a specific type of athlete that I like to work with the most, because they're all so different that it keeps everything so exciting.
That makes sense.
Like, I'm not going to treat the strongman like I am the bodybuilder, and I'm not going to treat the lifestyle person like the power lifter. And like there's different phases for each group that are really fun to work with, and they're all super dynamic of like the way that you approach each individual and each individual situation. That I have a plethora. I have a girl who's we started at 134 pounds for powerlifting. We cut down from 140 to there, and now we're back up to 150.
Ooh, right on.
And then I have a kid that I'm working with who's like started 297, 298. But now he's starting to cut downwards because he wants to be leaner for competition and be more competitive at a different weight class.
Right.
And so like even those two individuals have super different ways that you approach them, and that's a lot of fun. And it's the same thing with like bodybuilding, and like a peaking for a bodybuilding, a peaking for a powerlifting, a peaking for a strongman are all significantly different, and that's what makes it so fun.
And that makes sense. So it's just being diverse in it.
Yeah. And then the lifestyle person that's, hey, I want to take 20 pounds off because I have a wedding next month. We might not get 20, but we'll get you as close as we can. But they're gonna treat it as hard as they can, and they're gonna send it as much as they can. But like then you're working with somebody who's like, hey, I'm 260 pounds female, and I want to lose a good portion of weight, and I know this is gonna take time, and there's nothing cooler than getting them under 200 pounds.
Man, I bet that's amazing.
Yeah, and being able to completely like shift their mindset away of like things like giving them the control back to food and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really cool to just see those complete changes in people.
Right on.
And it's like you look like a different human at the end.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Then you end up feeling way better, and it's just like, damn, like that's pretty cool.
That's sweet. And it's like, hey, I've gotten into the gym. I'm super into walking. You know, I've regulated my blood sugar. You know, all those people have different things, and that's kind of fun. So you can't peak the bodybuilder the same way that you peak a powerlifter because
I bet
the time frames are different. And with powerlifting, it's like, okay, I have a 2-hour weigh-in window. What can I do in 2 hours to rehydrate if I had a water cut? Or it's like, let's get you as close as we can, and then we only have to take a couple pounds off. Where strongman have like up to a 36-hour window.
36?
They have 36 hours from when they, roughly, give or take, 24 to 36 hours, from when they do their weigh-ins to when they compete.
Oh, damn.
And so you can suck. I'm doing one right now where we're going to try and pull 30 pounds off in 7 days.
Damn.
Which isn't going to be unreasonable.
Dude, that's wild.
And so you could be able to pull somebody down for that time frame, but if you try to do that with a power lifter, they only have a 2-hour window to rehydrate and recarbohydrate up. Where a strongman have so much more time that you can drive their body weight back up to 260, 275 pounds in a 24, and maybe not that much time, or maybe not that much weight, but you can get them significantly heavier and get them fully hydrated, fully carbed up, fully ready to go. But you have to send it with food. Like, I need you IHOP for breakfast. I need you Chipotle for lunch. I need you having honey buns in between those. Like, you know, I need 2 or 3 Pedialytes in the system. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do that's just so much fun with each individual person. That makes it exciting.
So when it comes to peaking to like any of this like bodybuilding and whatnot, is it something that you have to learn from an individual, or do you like have you done something and tried it with another person, or is it like we're just gonna see what works with your body?
There's like an art and a science to it for sure.
Okay.
There's like people that are like, oh, I've done this in the past and it works really, really well, and I really, really want to do this, or hey, we've got 2 or 3 different shows because we got 2 or 3 different shows coming up, and I want to see what we have options of what we can do to peak them.
Okay.
And so there's different things that you can use in different time frames that make it that make it very different person to person. Like everybody's super individualized in the way that they approach things. But there's also like metrics that you're looking for in that time frame of like what's going on with somebody. And there's both like my eye and their eye of like what they think they look like and what you think that they look like.
Oh, for sure.
And then there's that combination of like finding which is one that's going to work best for them. And then being able to try, like the cool thing is like having multiple opportunities to try with somebody of like what's going to make them look the best on stage. You know, is it a water cut? Is it not a water cut? Like I try not to water cut people because you can really not get the carbohydrate or the fullness that you need later on with people.
Yeah.
But other people absolutely love it. And so there's different things that you try with each individual person to see what brings the best package for them.
So it's kind of like, in a sense, in some cases, like kind of like a collaboration of just like throwing around ideas and then, like you said, just like seeing which works the best.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I think you try and like, you know, usually if they're just doing one show, you try and just bring the best package that you can bring that day and not have a lot of variables or a lot of things to manipulate in that time frame. Yeah. But it depends on like where that show, like now if they're doing 3 shows, and then it's like, okay, let's pick the biggest show that you think is going to be the most important to you specifically, and then let's try and nail the peak for that one the hardest to where we have the least variables. And then the other shows you can play with different variables. Okay. And then you can manipulate different things. Like let's try and spill you for the show. Yeah. Let's get way too many carbohydrates in the system and see where your spill point kind of runs into, and then be able to backtrack from there. Or would you rather front load, or would you rather back load, or would you rather try and peak that night? Like, there's a bunch of different variables that you can do with each individual person to kind of maximize their kind of return, I guess.
Most definitely. Okay. And then as far as like the type of athletes that you have you ever turned any of your clients into pro or got them national ready? Like,
I'm working with a pro strongman right now. There's one dude that should stack up pretty soon to be a pro in strongman. There's a girl that's set like multiple state records in powerlifting. Oh, wow. That's really, really cool. I'm still not 100%. Like, they don't really have like a pro status for people in powerlifting. That's fair. Okay. And so like it's more of like what shows you qualify for. And I've gotten some people qualifying for some cool shows. Right on. And then bodybuilding, I haven't turned anybody pro. Hopefully next year. Yeah. There's a couple people stacking up that might be super competitive to run to nationals. But we'll see what happens in the next 12 months. Yep. So not yet for bodybuilding. My whole goal is to turn somebody pro in everything that I train them at. So I want to turn somebody pro in strongman. I want to turn somebody pro in bodybuilding. I want to turn somebody pro in powerlifting, whatever the definition of that is. and then help them set like state records or whatever the records may be for their weight classes.
Oh yeah.
And then the marathon guy that I'm running, like that I'm helping right now, I really want to turn in competitive, really competitive in that next level in marathon running, whether it be halves or fulls.
No, that makes sense.
So that'll be a lot of fun.
So now that you talk about having a diverse, I can't speak today, having diverse clients and different things, is it tricky to juggle all of that, or are you pretty good on staying on top of it and everything?
I'm really organized.
Okay.
Really organized. There is a lot of data that I consume per person, per day, per week.
Okay.
And being able to have them, on different points is super helpful.
Oh, for sure.
So like staying extremely organized is like the biggest key factor in my world. Like
right.
I live by my calendar.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah,
I bet.
Between like phone calls and different things like that and checking up with people, those are all super important things to stay on track of. So my organization is like really high.
For sure.
Like
for sure.
not to toot my own horn, I guess. But
you
for
sure.
have to stay organized. And I have an app that's dedicated that helps a lot too. And I have a lot of communication sources that I use with people that are super helpful too. Right. And just general random texts and calls and all that kind of stuff that always is good to see. Plus I see people inside the gym a lot as well if they're in city of Salem. But if they're outside, it's a lot more communication. The biggest key is the communication side.
Yeah.
Like if you're not texting me back, or you're not doing your check-ins, or you're not doing this and that, like it's a lot harder to stay like it's harder for me to help you with your results if I don't really know what's going on.
Right. No, that makes sense. Because like I remember, I think when me and Logan competed at that show, I think didn't you have other people in like powerlifting and then powerlifting stuff doing other things too, or was that pretty much like out of the way?
That was pretty much out of the way.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I did have somebody that was competing in a bodybuilding show the same day somebody was competing in a strongman meet.
Oh wow, okay.
Which is cool because he was out of state and I had to be here. I was here locally with her. I can't travel out of state to Chicago for as much as I wish I could.
Yeah.
But he went out of state for the competition, but his load frame was so much different than hers was that it's really easy to keep on top of keeping track of each person.
Oh, right on, okay.
And so it's just kind of like making sure you're managing your time properly.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay. Very well. Real quick, we're going to get into questions, but I have to stop it real quick and then turn off my timer.
Okay.
And then we'll get back to the question side of things. Okay, this is a good question. So the Tyrex dynasty is getting big. How do you see the trajectory moving in the next 5 years?
I have no idea. I absolutely love that question. Shout out to Polo.
Yes, shout out to Polo.
I absolutely love working with athletes. If I was to win a lottery tomorrow, I still wouldn't stop what I'm doing.
Fair.
It's just one of the coolest things. Like I don't want to work with one group of people only.
Yep.
Just because my background is so much in nutrition that I don't want to limit myself to a group of people, because I think that it would get really boring and monotonous. Right. And so, like, do I have ambitions of coming out with a pre-workout? Sure. Or a pump product or whatever it may be, or a protein powder or something. But, like, I don't want to have the same thing that's on the market that everybody else does. My whole goal is, like, athlete-focused right now.
Right.
Is not athlete-focused, but people-focused to get them the results that they want and the results that they deserve. If you're willing to put the work in, we better be hammering away and getting what you want done, because there's absolutely nothing like worse than somebody doing all the work they're supposed to do and not getting the results that they deserve.
Right.
Whether that just be miscommunication or lack of tracking or not being able to get a hold of whoever you're working with. I don't know where I'm going in the next 5 years. But I really want to turn people pro in whatever sport that they're doing. I really want to turn people competitive and they really like what they're doing. And I really, really want to help more lifestyle people lose the weight that they deserve to lose. Because you get warm and fuzzy feeling when somebody hits that 60, 70 pound mark down. Like, you re-amp somebody into being able to walk longer distances and like all that kind of stuff. Like that gives you warm and fuzzy feelings.
Oh yeah.
You'll see me bite my nails off anytime at any competition with any athlete. Like, it makes me so nervous, but I absolutely like love that. It gets you going. But no, it's super athlete focused. I don't have any ambition of coming out with stuff in the next 5 years ish. But I would love to be able to just focus on the people that I'm working with.
Heck yeah, man. Well, it's good stuff. I know. I like to say that I'm excited to see where you're gonna go, but I know that you have to stay pretty like focused in the now. But it's still cool to.
Oh yeah, and I'm the worst about it too, because like I have people, I have goal, like I know what your schedule for next year is going to look like depending on where we fall in specific time frames.
Right on.
I know exactly where a lot of my people are going to be being in the next 2 to 3 years, and like because of the work that they're putting in now and the effort that they're putting in now. But that means I have zero idea where I'm going in the next 5 years. Like,
That's
I'm
very,
like,
no,
I
that's
probably
very
should
fair.
look at that. But I know it's with them to where they want to go, and
Right.
like what the effort that they put in to be able, and like to maximize whatever their results will be.
Yeah.
And so that's a great question, but I'm like, I have no idea where I'll be in the next 5 years. But I know we'll be turning some pretty hard workers into some pretty big monsters. So
Yeah, no,
I'm excited.
I'm excited, bro. It's gonna be wild. Why are diet fads so big, and what's your advice to people thinking to try the new trend?
Fad diets are super interesting.
Okay.
They're like, I don't even have a good reference, but they're the new thing everybody wants to try. Like, oh man, I've tried keto, I've tried eating healthy, I've tried working out, I've tried X, Y, or Z, and it didn't work for me, right? And so like when you present them a new option, they're gonna want to try that option.
Right.
The basics work. Like a balanced diet, like, you know, proper amounts of protein, proper amounts of carbohydrates, proper amounts of fruits and vegetables, you know, proper amounts of fats. Like those things are super, super important, and that's not going to really change. The hard part with like fad diets is it really depends on the diet. Like there's downfalls and pluses to every single one that you do.
Okay. That makes sense.
Like people will see great results with keto.
Yeah.
But what they don't understand is like keto is you might see that 20 pounds come off when you start doing keto after, 3 weeks or a month or whatever. But people don't realize that you've depleted your glycogen stores.
Oh, yeah.
And so with every gram of carbohydrate inside the muscle tissue, you have 3 grams of water with it.
Jeez.
And so, if you deplete your glycogen stores and you're, still eating high fat, high protein, well, not technically high protein, but if you're eating high fat, you're going to lose your stores of carbohydrates. And then that's going to shed off a whole bunch of body mass, but that's really coming from water. So then once people fall off keto, they regain all that weight back because they just replenished all their glycogen stores.
Okay, yep.
And then it's like, oops, like, oh, keto works and it worked great, but I just couldn't stick to it. The sustainability wasn't there, right?
For sure.
And so it just depends on the diet where, I really think that you can maximize your results off of a balanced diet, like carbohydrate, fruits, vegetables, protein, all that kind of good stuff. And I think there's a lot of ways to make that a lot more fun. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of making those slight changes when you need them week to week. But the fad diets are hard because someone's always going to say like, oh, it worked great for me. This is the one that I want to do, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, you have a lot of other options in the tank, though, that you should probably try and give an extended use to. And we'll transition to it in a second. But the having somebody in your corner to when you have a bad day is super important.
Oh man, for sure.
And it's one of those like, it's okay, it happens. What can we do to prevent that? Or what can we do to maybe incorporate something like that?
Right.
If you fall off your meal plan and it's like, dude, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I need that, like, what can I go out and have with my family or friends or whatever it may be? And it's like, perfect, dude, go have that steak and potatoes. Yeah. Or go have that steak and that vegetables or whatever it may be. I never tell anybody to get chicken because restaurant chicken, you can make restaurant chicken at home.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's like having those options or sushi or whatever meal it may be, like having those things that you can go out and do with friends and family every once in a while.
Yeah.
But my biggest thing is getting you started and keeping you going for a bit to get the results that we want, and then we can implement those things.
And that makes sense.
So the fad diet's always a hard one. There's always going to be a bunch of like nutrition research on the side of researchers that's going to say that, this is the new next best thing. Right. When it probably isn't, unless there's something crazy that happens, which isn't going to happen. Yeah. But there's not really going to be like a next best thing. The things that people are doing is the things that work,
and you think keeping it just basic and keeping it as basic as possible never hurts, right? Like
no, and like you still want like a little bit of flexibility in there. Like the big difference between 20 grams of carbohydrates from raspberries and 20 grams of carbohydrates from blackberries, there's no difference.
No, right.
Like There's no reason to stress over those things. And so, but 200 grams of, weight of celery versus 200 grams weight of, let's say, blackberries or like Krispy Kreme donut, there's a big difference between those. And that's for everybody kind of knows that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So another question that I want to ask personally, because I get this asked quite a bit, is I'm not going to name the name. I think we already know, but eating kind of like if it fits your macros and kind of eating junk food to bulk. Like, what's your opinion on that? Because a lot of guys at the gym are like, oh, bro, like I want to bulk, but I don't want to eat these boring foods. I want to eat donuts. I want to eat deli meat. You know what I mean? Like, I want to eat processed cheese. Like, what's your opinion on that?
If there was like the gallon of chocolate milk a day diet that was going around, or I was like, bro.
Yeah, no, seriously, like that kind of thing.
I think that there's like alternatives that you can do. Like if you want to be a bodybuilder, you kind of have to accept the monotony of bodybuilding.
Okay.
That's a big factor for sure. Now, having like a little bit of junk in your diet when you're bulking, and I'm not saying every day. No. But like you have to be, depending on what you're doing, like what route you decide to go down, in competitive terms. Like if you want to play the two different games of bodybuilding, that's great. But you got to think about like cholesterol. You have to think about blood sugar. You have to think about how your body's going to respond to food later. You have to think about like what those things are doing to your body that isn't, they might have the same calories as your chicken breast and rice.
Yep.
But the way that your body responds to that might be significantly different. Like, if I go tell you, I'm like, hey, Zach, tonight I want you to do a gallon of milk before you go to bed. Like, you're gonna destroy your appetite for like 2 or 3 days.
Yes.
And then the bathroom directly after. And so there's that like combination of like, okay, like, hey man, can I do a whole wheat bun instead of rice in this meal because I'm so full and I don't want to eat rice anymore. I've having it through 2 or 3 times a day. And it's like, that's great. Like, you're still picking a grain option that's whole grain. You're getting some dietary fiber from it. You're getting other nutrients that you might not have. But it's like, hey, Ty, can I do a Krispy Kreme donut instead of my rice before my workout? And it's like, or instead of my pineapple before my workout? And it's like, probably not.
Probably not.
But
so you'd say like you want to think more longevity, not just short term and these kind of things. Because I think a lot of people think about what's going to satisfy them now, but they don't think about the health ramifications like down the road. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And like one of the ones that ends up killing me is the amount of times you hear people say there's this much sugar inside of a Krispy Kreme donut as there is in this cup of fruit or something like that, right?
I hear it all the time.
But there's so many other things inside the fruit that are going to be super helpful for you. Like I do a lot of Rice Krispies pre-workout for people.
Yeah. Right.
And people are like, well, I don't understand the Rice Krispies. I'm like, well, it's popped rice, number one. And there's some things that make it taste slightly better. And there's 25 grams of carbohydrates. It's going to be that little treat that you kind of have before you work out. Where you're like, I don't have to worry about it. But again, it's still very much rice-based.
Right.
And so you're getting a little bit different response of your blood sugar levels. Prior to training, I want to encourage, slightly higher blood sugar in that window because I want you to go use that energy.
Right.
I want to go have that power to go drive and get a sick pump and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I'll implement those things into pre-workout. And now somebody comes to me and they're like, oh my God, I'm starving. Like, I'm not doing a Rice Krispie treat.
Right.
Like, there's roughly 1 gram of carb for every gram of Rice Krispie treat.
Oh, jeez.
So where if I can get somebody 200 grams of pineapple, though, or something that's going to be a significantly more filling, that's also going to help keep you a lot fuller, a lot longer, but it's also going to curb that sweet tooth. Like I always get like, why do you do a lot of pineapple? And there's like multiple reasons, but it tastes good. It curbs that sweet tooth. It does a lot of those cool things that somebody needs prior to training. There's a good amount of fiber in it. There's a good amount of micronutrients inside of it. Yeah. It helps digest proteins kind of with brolamine and amino acid inside of it. Yeah. And so it does a lot of cool stuff for your body, but then it also keeps you a little bit fuller a little bit longer.
That makes sense. Okay, another one. I'm kind of picking your brain too at this because I'm very curious because I got in a debate about this with some gym bros. What is your opinion on artificial sweeteners?
I don't have any problem with them.
You don't have any problem with them? Okay, because I mean, just personally, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, I prefer aspartame over sucralose.
I think it's the way that you prefer it.
Okay.
If you have a reaction to one or the other, like don't do the one that causes the reaction.
Right.
Okay. But I don't really think there's a negative side effect to it. Okay. I think the one thing that you do when you start taking a lot of, if you get rid of artificial sweeteners is you lose a lot of happiness throughout the day.
If you use a lot of them, or
if you get rid of artificial sweeteners, you lose happiness throughout the day. If you need that sweet little thing like people like doing in their coffees, as long as it's fat free and sugar free, and you get it make your food taste a little bit better. You make your coffee taste a little bit better in the morning. That's so much better than dumping in a bunch of fat from like milk or anything like that. Because it's a great way to kind of scratch that itch of like, oh man, I'm gonna have a Diet Coke instead of a regular Coke. Yeah, like it's gonna help you. Depending on which population you are, it might help you lose weight.
That makes sense.
Really. If someone's drinking, 3 Diet Cokes a day or 4 Diet Cokes or 4 Cokes a day, I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying Diet Coke.
Oh, you're good.
If you're drinking 4 Cokes a day, they're like 150 to 200 calories each. That's 2, 4, 6, 8. That's almost 800 calories a day you're consuming in a liquid source.
Damn.
And that's like, oof, man, that's not a great added calorie to your day when you're trying to lose weight.
No, that makes sense. So you're okay with artificial sweeteners then?
I'm okay with artificial.
Okay, because like I'm not gonna lie, I've used them quite a bit just because like, for one, it doesn't affect me. Some people like, what's up?
Artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, bro. For me, some people say that it causes bloating and stuff, but I've used them for a good chunk of time, and I will say it stopped me from wanting to use, let's say like we were talking about like sugar stuff. It does like, especially in a prep setting, it makes me like just stay that much more focused on the diet because then it's.
I do think there's definitely a difference between like 1 or 2 Diet Cokes. Yeah. And like 8 and 10 Diet Cokes. Okay. I do think that you will have a difference between the two.
Do you think it causes like it cosmetically, or what are you talking about?
It's more of like the way you feel. Okay. And the way you look. You might have like, especially if you're sensitive to them. Yeah. If you're really increasing a lot of artificial sweeteners in your diet, like you probably will see. There's a threshold to anything, right? Mm-hmm. As weird as it sounds, like 1 or 2 beers for somebody, is probably not going to make them super drunk. But if they go have 8 or 10, they're going to have a really bad reaction to 8 or 10 beers.
That makes sense. So it's all personal dependent.
Yeah, and so like certain people fall in that threshold of like, they might have 2 Diet Cokes and be fine, but that third one causes them GI distress. Oh. You might have somebody who can drink 3 or 4 and that doesn't cause GI distress, but once they get to 5 or 6, they have the problem. So it's kind of finding like where your threshold is and sitting under that. Okay, because like I don't think I've noticed anything bad. I mean, I've definitely done a little bit more than what I would recommend, but but that's so much better than having a regular Coca-Cola.
And that's what I'm saying, because like I was even telling some family members, they're like, "Well, isn't diet soda bad for you?" And it's only because I've seen unhealthy people drink them. And I explained to them, I'm like, "No, like I've used it during a bodybuilding prep setting, and it actually helped because I wasn't getting in extra calories and sugars. It was literally just Diet Coke." Yeah. So.
And that's the combination of correlation versus causation.
Yes.
So, like, did that cause them to gain the extra weight, or is it because they're overweight that they drink this thing?
Exactly.
And there's like there's a huge difference between the two of those.
And that makes sense. I mean, I've done a lot of digging into it, so like I'm cool with it too. But I just want to get that opinion out because
no, for sure. Because like the correlation side of things, like like as bad as it sounds, obese people do this thing. Yep. And it's like, well, that might not be the reason why they gain the weight, though.
Exactly, it's not. I mean, you have to really like dig deep into it and really look. Like, no, they're drinking it now, but beforehand they were drinking regular soda, which led up to that.
So. Which led up to that. And then their doctor, whoever might be helping them, might be like, hey, you need to drink Diet Coke now, and then they actually might start trending downwards in weight.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and so. So we talked about diet trends. He's basically asking like, what are your 3 biggest diet trends you want to see die and why?
Like 3?
Yeah, or like we were talking about some trends. Like, what are ones that you wish that like people would just ignore and like just not even bring up? I'm sure there's something that kind of slightly bugs you.
I'm like a big fan of doing what you like. I won't really work with people who do like keto or carnivore. Okay. Those are kind of the 2 big ones off the top of my head that I can think of. I don't really keep up with the trends so much.
No, I don't think that makes sense. I mean, I'm sure like
the reason I'd like to see like keto and carnivore go away is like very different reasons, but it's just I really think that like dietary fiber is massive for your life. I think it's something that you should definitely try and get a decent amount in throughout the day. Mm-hmm. I think fruits and vegetables are super, super important. And I especially think that carbohydrates are extremely important to train with.
Oh, yeah.
Most definitely. Like can't cannot say it enough that I think carbohydrates are extremely important to train with. Like you saw in prep, like if you got pretty low, pumps didn't get as well, but the moment we threw in a bunch of food pre-workout, it made a big difference.
Well, the second, so I'll say that too firsthand, like when we were going down in prep, training just got worse, felt worse, but then like you said, the second that we added in the food, boom, just like different switch. And now with my carbohydrates, like 500 grams in one day or something like that. Yeah. My training's just the best it's ever been. Like and joints too. Like I'm sure that plays a factor in it when you have a lot more like carbs and fats, right? Like for joints and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely can.
Okay, that's what I noticed. But yeah.
And then like carnivore. Oh, okay. Carnivore is the one I was like, Yep. But it's just you're getting a lot of saturated fat inside the diet, and I think you should try and limit that to where you can.
Okay.
There's a certain point where you want to try and eliminate, like not eliminate it, but limit the intake of it as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. But you're gonna have some saturated fat in your diet. It's not the end of the world. You need some. It's good for you. Keto, I think is super interesting, but I think a lot of people like misconstrue keto. Yeah. Like I don't think that keto, like clinical ketosis is different. Like it's 80% carbohydrate or 80% fats and 20% protein. Mm-hmm. Now like modified keto, you probably go a little bit higher in protein, a little bit less fats. And I don't think in like clinical setting, it's more than probably fine.
Okay.
But I think that for like a lot of people who take keto and they're just like, oh, it's high fat, moderate protein, no carbohydrate. It's like, okay, that means it's cheese and it's all these other like super processed fats and it's, like beef tallow and butter. And I'm like, nah. Now like you're doing keto where it's like, super healthy fat sources like salmon and you're really focusing on like those things. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's like particularly bad for you.
Okay.
Or like even nuts to some degree. I'm sure there's an asterisk in there somewhere with some nuts that are higher in carbohydrates, but
for sure,
trying to hit those thresholds of like having enough of the things that you actually want inside of a diet and like to be able to help, I think is super important. But I think that like keto is an interesting one because I especially from an athlete perspective, I don't think it's a great source for them. But.
Oh, for sure. So another question I have is your thoughts on. I don't know if you've done much research on it, but like nicotine with like bodybuilding and nicotine with performance, like, huh?
I haven't done a lot of research.
Okay, I'm just curious. I'm just picking your brain now.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. There was some stuff that just came out that they were talking about using like nicotine to help like ADHD.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is cool, but I don't have enough information to have like an opinion on it.
Okay,
I don't think it's I don't. I will say, if you're not into it, don't start.
Yes.
If you're into smoking, try and get to something that's not smoking cigarettes.
Right.
So.
Okay. Well. Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk about it to like encourage people because I've had my past with nicotine in the bad sense, so you know what I mean. I've done good things with it now, but I'm just curious on that. Okay, that makes sense. What types of disciplines did you develop in the military that has helped you in bodybuilding?
I think like less in the terms of like bodybuilding and then more in the sense of like coaching.
Yeah.
I ran like an underwater drone program when I was in the military, so. We basically would sit on the ship. It's called a Sea Fox. We drop it into the water and we look for like underwater submersible. It's an underwater submersible.
Right on.
And then we would look for mines, but there's no mines when I was in, so we didn't really look for them. But we did all the training programs and all that kind of stuff for it.
Very cool.
And then I worked at like an ordnance facility in Seal Beach, California, to where we would like build bombs if we need. And we like put Hellfire missiles. I'm not sure what type of missiles right now, but like Patriot missiles and those kind of missiles on top of like destroyers, like the ships and stuff. And then we can turn like 500-pound or 1,000-pound or 2,000-pound bombs into like bombs that you would use for mines. So we have a conversion mechanism that we would do to be able to convert them into mines, and then we can drop them from planes into the water, and then that's how you would like lay a minefield.
Oh, wow.
And so,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely an interesting pass, that's for sure. But
dude.
It was technical. Mm-hmm. It's both. And then on the ship, when I was running the drone program, we also have like mine clearances are the thing that we do on these 200-foot wooden ships with 100 people on board. So we would actually take these big big metal cable strands, and we would drag them on the back of the outsides of the ships, and then we would have buoys, and then that's what we use as cutters and different things on mines to detonate them underwater, away from us, ideally.
Yeah, right.
But all of that is like controlling chaos as much as you can. And so that, in the sense of in coaching, is controlling as much chaos as you can, but accepting there's going to be a level of chaos that you can't control.
I like that, yeah.
And then trying to you're either preparing to succeed or preparing to fail. And so prepare to succeed. And so that's where it like comes in the coaching realm too. Is like the organization is super important. Like if I let the batteries die on the ship for our underwater submersible program, we're talking $20,000 that are just gone. Once they die, you can't recharge them. And so, like, making sure that's maintenance schedules on top of everything. It's like, it's super important.
Yes.
Especially when you make $20K a year in the military. So it's making sure that all of those things, and like that transferred into coaching, is like staying as organized as you possibly can.
Okay.
That makes a massive difference in the way that you communicate people with, like the way people communicate with you. You know, seeing you as someone that they like can help confide in, and then like not taking yourself too serious to some sense. Like there's this time to be very serious and like have that conversation with an athlete of like, dude, I need you to get it together. Right. But there's also the time where it's like, you know, controlling the chaos as much as they can. Like they just had a kid, they just did this, they just did this, they just did this, and like having that level of like respect and help for them is super, super important. So
that makes sense. Well, heck yeah, dude. That's all the questions I have on here. Did you have any questions on your thing?
The big one that I had was basically going over like what my favorite athlete type was.
Yeah, that's about it.
But we kind of went over that for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I have.
Okay. Well, I think we've gone through a lot of good information. Just not quite, I guess, for these guys. Are you looking to take on any new clients, or how's that looking for you?
Yeah, I'm always looking to take on new people. Okay. It's kind of silly, but the big thing in the military was like everybody paid for my education on the side because I used the GI Bill to go to school. Right. And then I've used that to be able to kind of work under certain people at certain times. So the more people I get to help, the better off I feel. And I know that's like a weird way to put it, but they help pay for my education, let me help the society, let me help the communication, let me help everybody. Right on. And that was the same thing. The whole reason I joined the military was to help people. So the more people I get to help, the better I feel. Heck yeah. And so I'm always down to help more people.
Well, awesome, man. So what social medias are you on? You can let them know, and then I'll tag them below.
Basically Instagram.
Instagram? There you go. I'll put his Instagram in there. You guys go hit him up. Like he said, he's looking for people. He wants to give back, and I think you definitely should. Even just to try for a little bit to see where it goes. I think it's great. I've had a great experience, especially being a competitor. Just the amount of care and precision he puts into it, and honestly, it was just fun to be able to hang out with you and everybody at the show before and after and all that, which is a very cool process. Definitely something I think is worth it if you have the time and money to do it. So
absolutely. Did you want to go into your training stuff at all?
Yeah, we can. Yeah. You want to talk about what we're doing right now? Yeah. Okay, so what we're doing right now is called DC training, so it's dog trap training.
2 G's.
Yeah, 2 G's. Basically, me and Tyge decided, like, when I was towards the end of prep, I was actually looking into it, and then he mentioned it to me, and I was like, that's actually ironic because I've been studying it myself. So me and him both kind of agreed to do it, and so far we've only been in it for like how many weeks now, do you think?
11.
Like 11 weeks, and the amount of progress I've made with the rebound is just insane, and I think we can do nutrition and training, but what things did you want to bring up in the training exactly?
I want to make sure that people, when they go into the gym, that they kind of have a plan what's going on. Okay. If you don't know what you're doing and you don't know what you did, it's really hard to see where you need to go. Okay. And so, like, that's the really cool part about DC is, like, it's the most extreme version of trackable progress. Yes. Is every single week you're trying to hit these different metrics and you're trying to be better than you were the week before. And so, like, I'm very much, everybody should be, and I don't think anybody will disagree with me on this, but progressive overload is like one of the key factors to making sure you're getting better. Yes. And that's why you've gotten so much better in your rebound, is because everything has been tracked on our way up. Exactly. And that's what I try and do with everybody, like lifestyle or not, because if you're not gaining strength as you're going up, you know, strength doesn't directly correlate to muscle size, kind of. But if you're not being able to track up where you're going, you don't know what you're going to be doing, right? If you squatted one week and then you hack squatted the next week and then you pendulum squatted the next week and then you front squatted the next week after that, you don't know where you've been, or you don't know where you're going because you don't know exactly where you've been. So if you go back to squat again and you don't remember what you hit last time, you can't track if you're going to get better there.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's very true.
And so like that's the big key is like, oh man, I squatted last week, so I'll go squat again this week, and I don't know what I did last time, so I don't know if I need to shoot for more reps.
Oh shoot, yeah, that's true though. I mean,
and then you don't know if you're in a deficit, if you've lost reps, you don't know how many reps you've lost, and so you can't decide if you got stronger or not. So as like a coaching perspective, it makes it really hard to see where we need to do on a diet change.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Whereas like if you're not progressing, if you have a lot of food and you're not progressing upwards in the off season, like if you're not gaining reps or weight on stuff, like do we need to address your training? Do we need to address your nutrition? Do we need to address your sleep? Do we need to address your recovery? What do we need to address to make sure that you're progressing in the way that you should be?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's the big keys.
And the number one thing too, and I get asked, when me and you've been asked this, like, well, how did you make all this progress in such short time? And that's literally the freaking answer is right there, is tracking everything down and being psychotic about it. Like, the one thing that me and Tyge talked about, he like pretty much was making sure it was driven in, is that like every single session you need to be hyped up to beat these numbers and the weights and reps. And then with that, like you said, like now I can know for sure, okay, why if I'm not trending up with each session, then something's wrong. That's like the number one thing too, is just really dialing everything in. Because when I first started working with you, I was very stubborn on it. We both knew this. I like to train in a specific way that helped me get to a certain point. But then me and you talked again. We were like talking about mentality, changing our mentality a bit of like, okay, well, if you want to go in this direction, we need to like really dial that in. And then once we started dialing the training and like really incorporating becoming stronger and with good reps, that's when I started noticing physical changes, but also just mentally. Like it mentally made me more confident in being able to train heavier, because I'm like, well, now I'm making progress, and it's a lot more fun. It makes training a lot more fun.
Yeah, how much did you Smith squat last time? How many plates aside?
Like 4.5, damn near 5.
For how many reps?
Like 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you probably going into a training session, like if someone was like, hey, let's throw 4.5 plates on here and see how many you can get. You probably like, that's a lot of weight. I gotta back down a little bit. But since you've been working up to that for so long, you're like, bro, I got it for 12 last time. I gotta get more.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like I don't want to say it takes the fear factor out of it at all.
No, right.
But it takes away you're like, well, I did it last week, so
yes.
I better be able to do it this week. I've done everything perfectly from point A to point B. Like I better hit this hard again.
Yeah.
And if I don't get more reps, like we had the one bad training session where it was like, ooh, do we need to deload? What do we need to do from here? All that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, like one bad training session isn't the end of the world, but being able to have that like communication where it's like, it's okay to have one bad session here and there.
Exactly.
But then finding maybe what that cause of was the bad training session was a big part of it too.
Yeah.
And then once you go back in the rest of the week, you're like, oh, I'm good. I actually don't need to deload. I just needed to get through this one day.
Exactly.
And then we still progress nicely.
Well, and then like I said earlier this week, I had that one bad session, but then I'm like, okay, the rest of the week was perfect. I mean, I have one more training session tonight, but other than that, everything is. I still progressed and beat the logbook.
Yep.
And that the fear factor, I'm no longer scared to go and lift heavy weights. In fact, now when my warm-up weights are heavier than they've ever been, just because like I developed the perfect system to warm up and while adding weight. Like I used to be terrified of that. I used to think like you have to warm up with super light weight for a very long time, but now I've learned like I'm okay with on leg press, starting with 5 plates and then adding 2 plates every single time, keeping the reps short to build up to that top set. And I mean, even after like 3 weeks of just tracking, I learned how to build up to keep lifting heavy without burning myself out, and that's the biggest thing too. And even Logan can talk about this. Like when he was very skeptical of it, but I got him starting to get a little more confident with lifting heavy. Because like in our minds, we think like lifting heavy means more injuries and stuff, but once you approach it a different way, you start to realize like, well, your body adapts to it, and then like we said, the fear kind of goes out of it.
Yeah. The funny thing I always like chat with people is they're like, oh, how do I get this specific muscle group bigger? And I'm like, I love the mentality about it, but if you want to be like big, you have to be strong.
Yes.
Like you're not gonna see one of the IFBB pros in the open league benching a plate for reps, right?
No.
Like you're gonna see him putting up 3 or 4, in some cases 5 plates, for,
Yeah.
like multiple reps on like flat or incline. Like obviously they'll move away from some of those specific movements the bigger they get because they're more injury prone.
Exactly.
And time frames and windows and all that stuff matters, but like to get to that level, like you have to be strong.
Yes.
You have to be like, holy crap, this is like one of the strongest people in the gym.
Well, and the cool thing is on hack squat, I can do like 7 plates a side for like 10, 12. But then I can also do about 4 to 5 plates for 20 reps.
Yeah.
So not only did I get stronger, but I was also get stronger with hypertrophy, which is nuts. Like I never thought in a million years I'd get to that point, but it's just surprising because, like I said, like I'm doing it's like leg press. I did 990 pounds for 10 reps, and then I did 720 pounds for 21 reps.
Yeah. And it's the getting strong in all the rep ranges. Like
Yes.
you want somebody strong in that like 5 to 9, but you also want them strong from 9 to 12, and then you
Yes.
still want them strong 15 to 20 reps.
Yeah, and honestly, reaching failure with heavy weight and high reps is mental. Like, it's hard to explain that feeling because like me and you this goes back like 2 or 3 years ago, even I think now, like when we were training legs, we do the newbie fit, but we were still like, I think we were doing decent weight, but just learning that. Learning what failure actually means, because I think a lot of people think they train hard, but until you're in an actual setting to learn, you don't know what hard is. Because I call it having a baseline. Like my baseline was here, then training with you, my baseline ended up going up here.
It's finding those like thresholds of like, oh man, like you stopped doing that set, but your rep speed was the exact same from rep 1 to rep 15. Like you want to get to the point where you're like, oh, that was really slow. Or I didn't even get it up. Like those are good spots on specific movements, right? But like those are like, oh no, like this might not go up, but I'm on a hack squat, and if I fail, then I'm at the bottom of the rep, and my knees aren't going to cave in, or my low back's not going to get hurt, or any specific problem. It's just now I'm stuck down here, and I have to load the plates off before I lift it back up.
Well, and I mean, honestly, with this program, I've bottomed it out plenty of times. But the cool part about bottoming out, though, is I still hit the rep range. But I think that's another thing I've told people is for some reason, people are scared to bottom out on lifts. And I mean, it can kind of be scary, but I think it's honestly necessary to like figure out how heavy is too heavy for you. Yeah. Because I mean, I've learned Smith squat, that's a little sketchy to bottom out on. You I mean,
like anything, there's a specific movement that you like, oh, this is safe to not be able to stand up with.
Yeah, and like I said, like when you start learning how to gauge things, you kind of know what's too heavy and what's not too heavy. But I think it's honestly okay to bottom out on lifts when you're learning what your limits are.
Yeah, as long as you do it safely.
Do it safely.
Yeah. Don't bottom out your squat if you don't have to.
Well, especially free weights. Jeez, that one's sketchy as hell.
That one's rough.
Well, because I've bottomed out on free weights, but it feels a lot more vulnerable to me because, I mean, there's only so much the safety bar can do.
Once you pop your back, it's kind of hard to unpop your back.
Yeah, but right now though, I mean, I haven't injured myself with it, and I don't plan on it, so I think everything's going good. Yeah, knock on wood. And then as far as competing goes, I don't want to speak this out too much, but with the way things are going, we might end up competing a lot sooner. I mean, you probably learned a lot about me from this last show, even, right?
Yeah. So yeah. I have a time frame. Yeah. In mind. So.
That makes sense, and I think.
You know the time frame.
Yeah. No. Right. No, for sure. I mean, where was I gonna go with that? Shoot. Well, is there anything else you wanted to go over with what we're doing together, or? Okay. I think we covered a lot of good information. Yeah. So, yeah. So thank you guys for watching again. Make sure to hit this guy up. I'll put his Instagram below, and really take in what we talked about today. I know it's kind of long, but it's all information that you can use. And then if you're confused about anything in here and you have questions, I would talk to him and get things rolling. Anything else you wanted to say?
No. We'll have to go over one day like difference of carbs, proteins, and fats.
Oh yeah. So we're definitely gonna. I mean, there's so much more to talk about. We're definitely gonna have different episodes just dedicated to one thing. But heck yeah. Well, thank you for coming today, bro.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And that's the end of this episode.